My sister returned home with a miracle baby, crashed my wedding, and tried to ruin my life. Now she's facing jail time for her lies. So I, 24 female, got married about a week ago. And unfortunately, things went quite haywire there. Let me start right from the beginning. I have an older sister, let's call her Stacy, 26 female, and we have always had intense sibling rivalry, and I'm serious about it. We hated each other growing up because all we wanted to do was one-up each other. We never got along, and even as we grew older, we continued to love each other. It was all subtle, and we made sure that we never outwardly showed people how much we disliked each other, but it was all there under the surface. She and I didn't talk to each other when we were living together, and would only put on a show for our family members whenever they would come over. But even our parents knew that we didn't like each other and never did. They even tried to fix things between us. I guess in a way that's what led to a lot of things going wrong eventually, but I'll come to that later. She moved out when she was 18 for college, and I was really relieved because that meant I could finally be myself around the house instead of constantly trying to walk on eggshells because of her. She would only come back for the holidays and brag about how great her life was since she was going to one of the best business schools in the state. I was a little jealous of her, but my only priority was to work harder than her and get into someplace better than her, which I did get to do because I got into an Ivy League school. So that was a pretty huge slap on the face for her, and I was celebrated in a much bigger way than she ever was. I thought that getting into an Ivy League school would put an end to our competition, but that didn't happen, since one day she just announced that she was starting her own business. And with some help from my dad, she actually did it. Now, I don't know if it was luck or just hard work, but it took off a couple of years ago, and she moved to Japan to expand the technology aspect of her business. It was a grand success, and our parents were proud of her. That was about 2 years ago, and since then she has been living in Japan. But unfortunately, things were not really going well for me after I graduated from college, and the fact that Stacy was accomplishing so much just added salt to the wound. I had found a job, but it was nowhere near as glamorous and satisfying as whatever she was doing, so I quit soon after I joined. That turned out to be a huge mistake, and I know it because I should have just stayed there and worked my way up, but I was being a fool and competing with my sister when in fact, I should have just been focused on myself and my career. It was a really stupid move on my part, and I regret it, but it's done now. After I quit my job, there was a phase where I was waiting for something to just fall into my lap, and when it didn't happen, I started getting depressed. It also didn't help that Stacy was doing great in her own field, and her business was something that my parents would brag about constantly. I hated it, but I couldn't even say anything without sounding bitter and jealous, even though I was feeling both of those things. I had to hide it whenever I met with my family and pretend to be happy for Stacy because anything other than happiness was an unacceptable emotion. That was around the time that I met my husband Jackson, 25 male. I'm so glad that I did because meeting him practically changed my life. It had been about months since I had quit my job and had been waiting for some better opportunity to come by, but with no such luck. Like I said, I was really depressed, and I was getting very frustrated with my life, so I downloaded a dating app. I wasn't exactly looking for anything, I just wanted to hook up with people and use it as an outlet to distract myself from how badly things were going for me. I was struggling to cover rent and even buy the basic necessities for myself. I had to depend on my parents for money. They would send me money every month. I also had a certain amount of money set aside from when I was working, but none of it was enough, and I was really struggling with the bills. My parents would help me out, and I would promise them every month that I would return all the money to them as soon as I was able to. I could always hear the disappointment in their voice, and that just drove me crazy because I knew that I was not doing my best. And it was very difficult for me to come to terms with the fact that, at that moment, Stacy was doing far better than me, and I was a huge disappointment to my parents. So I was using dating apps and random dates, which I didn't even like much, to distract myself from my feelings. And for a while, it worked. I went out on a few dates for a few weeks, but most of them were only interested in hooking up and nothing more. It was mostly just casual. But that changed after I matched with Jackson. He was a really interesting guy to talk to at first, and he ticked all my boxes. He had also been a straight-A student when he was in school, but after he graduated from high school, he actually went to culinary school and was working in a restaurant when he matched with me 2 years ago. He was funny, charming, and just the right amount of masculine. But at the time, I had told him that I wasn't looking for anything serious. When he asked me out on a date after almost weeks of talking to each other online, he told me that he was looking for something serious and was not interested in having a casual relationship. He was dating to marry. I liked the fact that he was honest and upfront about what he felt, so I decided to give it a try, not knowing what was in store for me. I went out with him after agreeing to a first date just to see how it went, and it went incredibly well. It felt like he and I had known each other for years, and I think it was pretty much the best date I had ever had in my life. We had a lot of fun, and with him, I really felt like I was not trying to prove anything. which was the first time that I had experienced that. So that was a nice change of pace from the way that I usually feel around other people. It was an easy conversation, and we just clicked. And I don't know what changed, but I decided to give our relationship a real chance. We went out on a couple more dates, but after we had been together for just 3 months, I found out that I was pregnant. The only thing that I was worried about at the time was how Jackson would react to it, nothing else. Because he already pretty much knew everything about me that he had to know. Within the first few weeks of our relationship, I had told him everything about myself and my family, especially the part when I'd spent my entire life competing with my sister and trying to outdo her. But being with him made me want to be a better person, a person of my own. He already knew everything about me, and I think I knew everything about him too by that point. In fact, he had been the one to push me to snap out of my depressed phase and actively start looking for a job, instead of just waiting for something to come to me. So I ended up taking back my old job in the company that I quit. And I think it was one of the best decisions that I had ever made. And when I found out that I was pregnant, I didn't really have a lot to worry about. By then, I had been working for almost a month, and things with Jackson were also going really well. The only thing that I was concerned about was how he would react to this, because most people would just think that it was too soon and back out of the relationship because they would get scared. But deep down, I really wanted to have the baby since it just felt right. I can't explain it in words, but I just felt ready to be a mother. And to my surprise, when I told Jackson about the pregnancy, he was actually really supportive. He told me that it was my body, so I could decide whatever I wanted to, and he would stick with me no matter what. And when I told him that I wanted to keep the baby, there was nobody happier than him. He told me that he had actually wanted me to keep the baby because he felt like he was ready as well, even though he was young and we had just been together for months. He told me that he didn't want to sound crazy or come off too strong, which is why he had left it up to me, but my choice had made him the happiest man alive. We agreed that even though we were having the baby, we would wait to get to know each other better before we got married. It was decided. We went through with the pregnancy, and a couple of weeks later, we even found out that we were having twins, so that was another big surprise, but we were rolling with it. He moved in with me shortly after we found out about the pregnancy and introduced me to his parents. Around the same time, his parents were really sweet, and they seemed to love all the kids equally without ever forcing anybody to compete with each other. It seemed like a healthy family, and it was the first time that I was ever seeing how it functioned because I have never experienced it personally. However, I was kind of skeptical about introducing him to my family because I knew that my parents were not going to approve of my life decisions. I was a bright student with a great future ahead of me, but I had decided to have kids with a man I had barely known for less than a year, and I had even moved in with him. Any parent would disapprove of this, and my parents would probably lose their head. So I kept putting it off until I started to show, and then I knew that there was no hiding it anymore. I arranged a meeting with them when I was 4 months along and decided to tell them everything. I had invited them over to my house and had Jackson be there for me for moral support. They knew that I had been dating Jackson for a while, but they didn't know that I had been living with him and that I was also going to be the mother of his kids soon. So, when I told them about it, I expected them to be angry and yell at me or something, but they reacted in a very unexpected way and actually seemed to be happy for me. They were thrilled and hugged me and stuff while congratulating me on the pregnancy. And when I told them that I was actually having twins, my mother almost fainted out of happiness. It was an unexpected reaction, but I was glad that they were not mad at me. In fact, after they got to know about it, they even threw me a party and announced to everybody that they were going to be grandparents soon. I had also told them that Jackson and I didn't want to get married just because we were having kids together. We wanted to live with each other for a while before making such a huge commitment, and they were fine with that as well. They were really supportive of everything, and I was shocked, but it was a happy kind. I was just really grateful that my parents were on my side on this because I would have hated it if they turned against me or tried to change my mind about things. I even talked to them about how they were being so supportive, and I had actually not expected that of them. So, they told me that they were aware that throughout our childhood, they had never really been good parents, in the sense that they had never stopped my sister and me from competing with each other, and they thought that they were doing a good thing. They thought that they were doing us a favor by constantly pushing us to do better, but in doing so, they realized that they might have screwed things up for us in the long run. And this realization happened when they got to know that I had quit my job because I wanted to do something better. They knew that this decision had been influenced by the fact that Stacy had started her own business and was doing really well, which is why I also wanted to do something of my own and outdo Stacy. I found it weird that they knew about this, even though I had never really mentioned it to them, but they said that as parents they knew what was going on, and they felt responsible for it. So they wanted me to know that they would be there for me no matter what, and I didn't need to constantly compete with Stacy to prove that I was worthy of their love and affection. They would always love me, and they were equally proud of both of us because we had always done our best, and that's what mattered to them the most. It was a much-needed conversation, and I'm glad that I talked things through with my parents because it made it a lot easier for me during the pregnancy and even afterward because I could freely ask my parents to help me out with the kids while Jackson and I were working. They had told me that they had had a similar conversation with Stacy as well, but apparently it didn't really go as well as they had expected it to. She had just laughed and said that she didn't need them to say such things because she genuinely believed that I was a sore loser, which is why I was having a breakdown. And that's why my parents were trying to cut me some slack by telling us that they were equally proud of both of us. But she knew what the truth was. She just refused to accept that our parents had been really trying to turn over a new leaf and be better parents. She was just convinced that she was more worthy of their love because she was doing better in life by her standards. My parents told me that they would talk to her when she would come back for the holidays because online it was just not the same. So, they promised me that they would talk to Stacy and have the same conversation that they did with me, so she would also stop trying to compete with me because up until that point, she had been going above and beyond and trying to make me feel bad. Ever since I had announced the news of my pregnancy, she had been sending me backhanded compliments and making stray remarks that were completely uncalled for in the family group chat, just to put me down and make me feel bad about the pregnancy, even though I really didn't think there was any reason for me to feel bad about it. But to her, it was obviously a failure and a huge one at that because I was knocked up before marriage and was living with some guy who I barely knew. So to her, this was a huge win for her, and she believed that now she could say whatever she wanted to me. It was really getting on my nerves, and I had almost wanted to leave the group chat several times, but my parents were the ones who convinced me to stay because they said that they were really trying to be better parents, and they wanted us to stick together, so I stayed for their sake. My parents promised me that they would put an end to this, or at least they would try their best, and if they were unable to do so, then I was free to leave the group. So, when Stacy came back for Christmas, my parents told me that they were going to talk to her, and they did. But unfortunately, she was too far gone by then. Her sole aim in life at that point was to humiliate me and make me feel as small as she could. She was insufferable that year, even though she had been quite annoying for the past couple of years before that as well because of her successful business. But that year was much worse, because not only had she just come back from Japan, but she had also come back knowing that I was pregnant and not even close to her in terms of success and wealth. And she did not let go of even one opportunity to remind us of that. The entire time, she was just bragging about herself and shooting me looks or even asking me if I was not happy for her. It was just really awkward and uncomfortable, and I had to leave the party early because I was trying really hard not to lose my temper or end up crying in front of everyone. After that Christmas party, my parents tried to talk to Stacy so she would cut it out, but instead she said that she had worked hard to get where she is, and she wasn't going to let me take that away from her, so she was going to brag about it all she wanted, and I would just have to deal with it. So that is the point where I decided that I would cut ties with her, and I left the group. My parents also believed that it was for the best. We hadn't spoken in years, and I had no idea what she had been up to. But recently, I heard from a couple of my relatives that she was back from Japan with a baby. I heard about it for the first time around 4 weeks ago, and apparently it was a miracle baby who was just 2 months old. My parents told me that they had been on video calls with her several times before she came back and had never noticed anything about her, let alone that she was pregnant. She said that she had wanted it to be a surprise for everyone and said that she had become a mother and had recently gotten married to her husband, the father of her child, in a private ceremony just a year ago, and now she was finally ready to talk about it. The timing was nothing less than suspicious because pretty much everybody in the family knew that I was supposed to get married around the same time. But now, thanks to her, everyone could only talk about her marriage and her daughter. She said that her husband was still in Japan because he had a lot of work and couldn't make it, but she had come here with her daughter because she wanted her family to meet her. But I couldn't let something like that get under my skin because I was getting married, and that was supposed to be a magical time. So, even after she came back, I continued to avoid her. Unfortunately, it didn't matter anyway because she found a way to ruin my wedding. She turned up on the day of my wedding uninvited, just after the ceremony. I'm honestly just thankful that at least whatever happened after the ceremony was over. She crashed my wedding, and when I saw her among the guests, I almost flipped out. But Jackson and my parents helped me calm down because apparently she had snuck in, and if I made a scene, then I would just be playing right into her hands and make my wedding day all about her. So as long as she was not actively doing anything terrible, we could just let her stay and deal with it later. I was getting married at Jackson's aunt's farmhouse, so the security there wasn't tight anyway, which is how she managed to get in the first place. Now, I kind of regret not spending enough money on security because, had I done so, we could have been able to avoid a lot of things. Throughout the time that she was there at the wedding, all that she was talking about was how she was incredibly lucky because of her miracle baby and how my children were illegitimate and didn't count because I had them before marriage. It was incredibly insulting because she was saying that to everybody that she met while socializing at my wedding, and everyone I talked to later on came up to me and told me about it. I had to smile and let it go because I didn't want to fight with her and ruin my own wedding. It was incredibly difficult, but I was getting through it somehow. At one point, I almost lost it, but before I could even say anything, the place was stormed by the police. I had no idea what was going on, but they made us seal the exits and we were locked in. Within seconds, they had arrested Stacy, and it was really disorienting because there was a woman who was screaming and crying and holding the baby that was supposed to be my sister's, claiming that it was hers. After that, it was a blur of statements and handcuffs and stuff like that. It was not until much later that we figured out that the baby had not been Stacy's. Apparently, all the pictures that she had been showing us were taken from a friend's social media account, and she had photoshopped herself into them like some sicko. And the worst part of it was that all the times that she had met us with the baby, she had actually been babysitting for her friend. She had been living with her friend ever since she came back from Japan because she had ended the lease on her own apartment and was looking for a place. So, she was babysitting for free, which is why she had never invited our parents or our relatives to visit her and had only been visiting them. On the day of my wedding, she decided to take it a little far and attend my wedding without her friend's consent. What she had done was take the baby out while her friend and her husband were asleep and refused to take any calls afterward, which is why her friends had to get the cops involved and have her arrested. Thankfully, she had been talking incessantly about my wedding and how she wanted to take me down, so her friends had been able to guess where she would be. And that's how they had been able to track her down and have her arrested. It was literally crazy. And I can't believe that it happened, but it did. And my family and I have still been having a hard time coming to terms with it. To think that Stacy was extremely competitive was one thing, but knowing that she was actually willing to go to such extreme psychotic lengths just to prove to our parents that she was better than us was very concerning. Now, she's begging her friends not to press charges against her because she's obviously not going to win that one, and she'll end up in jail. So, nothing has happened yet, but for some reason she's blaming me for all of this and claims that apparently I was only getting married to rub it in her face. Now, let's not forget that I haven't been in touch with her for almost 2 years and haven't even spoken to her ever since our last interaction. I had even been gracious enough to let her crash my wedding because I didn't want to make a scene and humiliate her. She is the one who took my wedding and turned it into something ugly. If anything, I should be the one blaming her. So, yesterday, when she reached out to me and told me that I needed to convince her friends that I had driven her to do something crazy, I told her that I wish she would end up in prison because that's where she belongs. Either that or the psych ward because she is crazy. But right now, my parents think that I need to help her out and convince her friends that she was not thinking straight because I had been tormenting her with the news of my marriage and kids, just so that they don't press charges against her and get her arrested. So far, since she had been living with them and babysitting the infant anyway, the case is a bit more complicated, and the police haven't been able to figure out what to do about it and can't proceed without the consent of her friend. It would have been a clear-cut case of kidnapping had she not been living with them and actively taken care of their baby in their absence. But that's not the case here, so that's why she still managed to evade being jailed. And she has been claiming that they had already consented to her taking the baby with her, but there's no way yet to confirm it, so she's not in trouble yet. All we need to do is convince them, but I'm not sure I want to do that. I really don't think that she deserves any help from me of all people, but my parents think that it would be wrong on many levels for me to turn my back on her. So, AITA for wanting my sister to end up in jail? Update. Okay, so I have decided that I'm going to cut ties with my entire family, including my parents. Yeah, they were very helpful during the pregnancy and after birth, but I'm just done with them now. I think I need my space for a while, and whether they are supportive or not is secondary to me right now. I just want to be with my husband and kids, period. And I can't do that if I'm getting caught up in their drama. So I want to be out of this because it's really messing with my head now, and I'm grateful for my parents and everything that they did after I announced I was pregnant, but I'm just really tired of everything. As for Stacy, I think it's very obvious why I don't want to help her. She doesn't deserve my help, and she dug her grave herself so she can get out of it on her own. Jackson thinks that it's the right choice, and yeah, that's it. Update 2. So, I just heard from a couple of my relatives that Stacy is in big trouble because her friends have decided that they are going to press charges and pursue this matter further. So far, Stacy's been claiming that she had her friend's consent to take the baby with her whenever she pleased, but that's going to be difficult to prove in court. And given her behavior during the wedding and how she had been claiming the child to be her own, I can't think of any way that she can get out of this. It's upsetting, but honestly, I can't say I'm surprised. I'm also not speaking to my parents currently, And I don't think I will until they tell me that what I did was the right thing and they're sorry for asking me to help her. Which is a lot to ask, but I don't want to speak to them until they realize how badly they had messed things up for Stacy and me as kids. They need to really understand that this is partly their own doing. Update 3. Hi. So Stacy is on trial right now, and we don't know what's going to happen to her, but she's looking at jail time for around 5 years now if she gets convicted. But she is mentally unstable, so that might get cut shorter. Anyway, that's not our business. So Jackson and I are still going on our honeymoon, and we are going to try and make up for a terrible wedding. I can't ask my parents to babysit because we are still not on speaking terms. So we are going to have to ask Jackson's parents to watch our children while we are away, but it's just going to be for 2 weeks. So it's not a long time. I'm just hoping that my honeymoon is better than the wedding, and I have a feeling that it's going to be since that will just be me and Jackson.